Hello and welcome back. With week 1 now in the books, it's time to take a look at our first official power rankings. Last week was the predictions, kind of where I thought all the teams would end up post-draft without any games being played. Now we get to hit the reset button and start off completely fresh. Now taking up the rear is Marie and Kelly. Josh Allen and Tyreek Hill brought in the bulk majority of the points for Marie and Kelly this week. Starting with Josh Allen, he really took over in that game and led the Bills to their victory over the Cardinals with the 232 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. That's crazy. Ended up with 32 points on the week. That's a really strong week for Josh Allen to start with. Tyreek Hill came up big in his game against the Jaguars, getting 27.4 points off of 7 receptions, 130 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Doing all of this while being handcuffed behind the back by Jalen Waddle. See, a lot of people are going to be pointing back towards the whole detainment that happened earlier in the day for Tyreek Hill. But when I saw that whole Jalen Waddle touchdown celebration with Tyreek Hill and the handcuffing thing and everything, didn't make me think of that. It made me think of this. Outside of those 2 superstar caliber performances, the rest of the team did rather subpar. Raheem Mostert only got 4 points this week off of very limited rushing opportunities and very limited receiving opportunities. Devon Achane took a majority of that away from him. And where the real concern comes into play is that he did not practice on Tuesday and is already slated to be out. I would definitely be concerned for Maria and Kelly with Mostert right now. DeAndre Swift only got 5.1 points this week with only 30 rushing yards to his name. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. The Bears' offense looked rather depleted against the Titans, and if we're pointing fingers at somebody, it's gonna be Caleb Williams. But Caleb Williams and this offense gets another opportunity in primetime Sunday night against Houston. I think there's an opportunity there for them to really push ahead, and DeAndre Swift should get more than 5.1 points this week. Chris Olave only got 3.2 points. He caught both of his targets for 11 yards total on the week. I wouldn't be too concerned about this one. The Saints blew out the Panthers. It was very clear that they were going to be running the ball for majority of the second half. And the 2 touchdown opportunities were stolen by Rashid Shaheed and Foster Moreau. I expect things to improve this week as they face a more competitive opponent. And Dalton Kincaid only getting 2.2 points. He got 2 targets, 1 reception, 11 yards. It's not a great look. I get that. But right now with Josh Allen and this Bills team, they're looking for their wide receiver 1. And so that entire offense is just kind of scrambling around, throwing to any target that they can get to because they want to establish who's going to be the clear wide receiver 1. Once they get that, I expect all of the Bills to kind of fall back into form and have a good path for the future. Marie and Kelly may be in last place, but they do have a ton of room to improve. I think a lot of these players kind of underperformed this week, and if they make some key roster adjustments, especially getting some running back assistance, this team will eventually move up the ranks. At number 9, we have Tyler, and there isn't really a whole lot to say, just our big note of the Falcons lost 18-10. They didn't give up a single touchdown, they just gave up 6 field goals, which is nuts. Bijan Robinson was the true leader for the Falcons this week. He got 18 carries for 68 yards and 5 receptions for 43 yards. That gave him a total of 16.9 points. And for Kyle Pitts, we're very fucking excited. You know why? Because he got the 7th touchdown of his career. Yay, Kyle. We love you, Kyle. He got 3 for 3 for 26 yards and ended up with 11.7 points on the week. Now, Drake London is where I have a real concern, only 2.2 points. He got 3 targets, 2 receptions, 15 yards. The big thing that concerns me about London is that Kirk Cousins did not look good, and if this is going to continue to be an issue moving forward where Kirk Cousins is kind of underperforming the standard that they gave him with all that money, that's really going to handcuff Drake London to the floor. Looking at the other side of the Redbird domination, Marvin Harrison Jr. only got 1.4 points. He had 3 targets, 1 reception, and 4 yards. I'm not too concerned about this. I know how it looks on paper, but when you realize that he ran basically every single route possible and just couldn't come up with anything, I think there's room for improvement. It seemed like the Bills pretty much had Marvin Harrison on complete lockdown this week, so I'm not really freaking out. Outside of the Redbird domination, we got 2 great performances from Tony Pollard and Jalen Waddle. Tony Pollard got 18.9 points off of 82 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And Jalen Waddle ended up getting 17.6, where he went 5 for 5 for 109 yards. But that's honestly not really important. I just want to take an opportunity to bring this back up. The hope for Tyler is that the Falcons offense can score big against an Eagles defense that was towards the bottom 5 at the end of the year. The Falcons should be good so long as the game is at number 8, we got Nick and Lewis. And Nick and Lewis are the tale of two cities here, as they've got complete overperformances by Mike Evans, Devon Achane, Stephon Diggs, some really, really great performances there, or just complete and total busts like the Jets defense and Evan Ingram. Mike Evans was unbelievable this week for the Buccaneers. He got 32.02 points. He was 5 for 61 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Not 1, but 2. Devon Achane got 27.4 points off of 24 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, 7 receptions, and 76 yards. That is an unbelievable stat line for Achane, and it's clear that he's going to be the running back number 1 for some time to come. However, there is concern. Along with Raheem Mostert, he did not practice this past Tuesday, and he's not looking too good coming into this very close Thursday night game that the Dolphins have to play. Stephon Diggs was rather crucial in the short game, only getting 6 receptions for 33 yards, but he got 2 touchdowns out of the whole thing, so he ended up with 22.2 points. Overall, those are some really fantastic performances, but I do have some major concerns, which is why Nick and Lewis aren't ranked higher. The first real concern is with that Jets fucking defense. 0.38 points. I wrote it on there. They didn't just look bad. They looked atrocious. And I know, all the football nerds are going to be saying, but it was the San Francisco 49ers. They have one of the best offenses in the league. I don't fucking care. They didn't have CMC. They threw in the backup. Not Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell's injured. No. They threw in the backup. And they still somehow managed to put up 32 points against a Robert Saleh-led defense. If I were head coach Robert Saleh right now, I would stand up, walk right into the front office, and demand that they figure out how to get Hassan Reddick signed to this team, because they desperately needed him this week. My second concern comes with Evan Ingram. And Evan Ingram did have a bad week. He got 4 targets, 1 reception, 5 yards, only got 1.5 points. That's not fantastic. But that's not where the true crux of my concern is. The true crux of my concern comes from the fact that Evan Ingram is the only tight end on this team. There's no other tight ends, which means that if Nick and Lewis want to put somebody else in, they're looking towards free agency or they're looking towards trading, of which there isn't a whole lot of options right now because tight ends have looked pretty terrible. If Nick and Lewis are looking to trade, they do have some good options on their bench. They got Tyler Lockett with 14.2 points. He caught pretty much every single reception for 77 yards, as well as J.K. Dobbins with 24.3. He got a rushing touchdown in there. He had a 61-yard rush. He did fantastic for week 1. Nick and Lewis are truly going to be an interesting team to watch this week as we see if the numbers start to normalize out for them and where they would end up in the middle with those overperforming players coming back down to reality and these complete and total busts coming back into relevance. In 7th, we have Zach, who played in one of the more competitive games this week. In terms of his best player, he had Brandon Aubrey, who was 4 for 4 on field goals and 3 for 3 on extra points. Just kicked some absolute bombs right up into the uprights. We love Brandon Aubrey. Now, keeping that number with Brandon Aubrey in mind, let's turn our direction over towards Zach's running backs, who combined for 24.9 points, which is just a little bit over 2 points more than Brandon Aubrey. The kicker. The reason I'm slightly concerned about this is because Jonathan Taylor and James Cook had rather pedestrian weeks, and Jonathan Taylor was his first-round pick. Hopefully we start to see a little bit more out of Jonathan Taylor, but it really just depends upon how they choose to scheme this offense moving forward. And just like with Dalton Kincaid, James Cook is in a weird spot since they don't have a clear wide receiver 1. We'll have to see how his usage goes up or goes down, contingent upon what they end up finding out with their wide receiver 1 situation in Buffalo. Travis Kelce got 6.6 points off of 3 receptions for 34 yards. Personally, I'm not too concerned about this. That Ravens game looked rather ugly, and they're going into a Cincinnati rivalry game, and I say it's a rivalry because that mayor has done some fucking work against this Chiefs team, really calling all the shots out on them. I think there's room for Kelce to improve here. Now, Puka Nacua is a spot that I'm truly scared about. The second-round pick for Zach ended up only getting 8.3 points. He had 4 targets, 4 receptions for 35 yards, which are great numbers. However, he did injure his PCL in the second quarter, which has now put him on the IR. I'm curious to see where Zach tries to pivot from here. The clear option is located over on his bench with Jaden Reed. He had 34.5 points. He had 4 receptions, 138 yards. Not only did he have a receiving touchdown, but he also had a rushing touchdown. That is an unbelievable week for the Packers wide receiver 1, and I think that could become a clear option for Zach now that Puka could be out. Additionally, David Montgomery got 16.9 points on the bench with 91 rushing yards and a crazy rushing touchdown on this unbelievable drive in overtime that just looked like the Lions punching it straight up the Rams' gut. Despite the fact that it was a rather tough week for Zach, I do think that there's a lot of promise, and once Puka Nacua comes back from that PCL injury, this team is going to be looking scary. Coming in at number 6, we have Warren, who had the unfortunate task of playing the best team this week, and even though he put up some great numbers, he just got completely outshined. Saquon Barkley was the Eagles' offense with 34.9 points on 109 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and 1 receiving touchdown. CJ Stroud almost got 20 points with just an impressive 75% completion rate, 234 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns, both of those to Stephon Diggs. After CJ Stroud, we get into the central issue, not only for this team, but just in general for the whole NFL, which was that wide receiver 1's kind of underperformed as a whole this week. Looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown to start, he had 4.3 points off of 6 targets, 3 receptions, 13 yards. A little bit better of an improvement for Zay Flowers with 11.2 points off of 6 receptions for 37 yards. And Devontae Adams literally copying and pasting the 6 targets, 5 receptions, 59 yards for 11.2 points. The key highlight of the bench for Warren had to come from James Conner. He had 19.7 points, 50 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown this week. That is truly a great performance for the Cardinals, and I think it does open up a lot of opportunities for Warren to start looking at trades. Warren is currently sitting at the number 6 spot, mainly due to just a very tough matchup week 1, but I do expect to see some improvements despite everything that you see here in front of you. This team is going to crack the top 5 at some point in the near future. I promise you. At number 5, we got Tristan, and a lot went in his favor this week. Anthony Richardson popped off this week with 26.74 points. That came off of 212 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, now 1 interception, brought it down a little bit, but moving over into the rushes, he's got 6 carries, 56 yards, and a rushing touchdown. That means that Anthony Richardson as a whole kind of had 3 touchdowns this week, which is insane. Kenneth Walker also had a fantastic week, getting 20.4 points off of 103 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Nico Collins really separated himself as the wide receiver 1 this week for the Texans, gaining 19.3 points off of 6 receptions for 117 yards. Now for Tristan, the real concern comes with Amari Cooper. He only got 3.8 points this week off of 9 targets, 2 receptions, 16 yards. Cooper and Watson were really out of sync this week. Watson is not looking like a very good quarterback at all. I would be concerned. In terms of Tristan's options on the bench, he did have 2 pretty good receiver performances that he could sub in. Starting off with Rashee Rice, he had 18.8 points off of 9 targets, 7 receptions, and 103 yards. Then we've got Brian Thomas Jr. with 15 points. He had 4 targets, 4 receptions, so we went 4 for 4 for 47 yards and a receiving touchdown. I do think there's possibility that Brian Thomas Jr. continues to take over as the wide receiver 1 for the Jags, so there's that potential upside. But if I were him, I would be starting Rashee Rice. It seems like Mahomes is kind of throwing towards those receivers a little bit more, and he might be a fantastic option. Tristan looked good coming out of week 1, and we have to see if he continues that momentum going in to week 2 against Maria and Kelly. Coming in at number 4, we've got the auto draft superhero in Saira. Starting with Sarah's quarterback, Lamar Jackson got 21.3 points, really just trying to push the Ravens as far as they could possibly go against the Chiefs. He had 273 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, a 63% completion rate, 122 rushing yards, and unfortunately 1 fumble as they just came up short against the Chiefs. Sarah elected to swap in Chris Godwin and by golly, that was the right pick because he got 23 points on the week. 8 targets, 8 receptions, 100% catch rate there. 83 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown for Chris Godwin. That was a fantastic move by Saira. Ka'imi Fairburn, the kicker, got 17.2 points on this week, going 3 for 3 from 50 yards. That's crazy. And 2 for 2 on extra points. Just a fantastic job there for the Texans kicker. Now, Kyron Williams was an interesting one. We were going to see how that played out with him being the punt returner as well as the lead back, but that didn't really stop him. He did get 50 rushing yards and a touchdown to total 14.9 points on the week. To wrap off the key players from the starting lineup, we do have CeeDee Lamb with 14 points. He had 10 targets, 5 receptions, 61 yards. It was looking early on like he wasn't going to be playing in this game against the Browns. He ended up coming in and played a rather large role. The one key player on the bench I want to highlight for Saira is Malik Neighbors. Now, Malik Neighbors was subbed out with Chris Godwin, which was the right move, but Malik Neighbors wasn't a bad option as well. He had 11.8 points, 7 targets, 5 receptions, 66 yards, and that's with Daniel Jones throwing him the fucking football. Like, I think there's some good opportunities for Malik Neighbors to kind of be the savior for the Giants this season, even though they probably won't win any games. Saira came in, crushed her opponent, took the number 4 spot, and I'm honestly very excited to see where her team goes from here. At number 3, we have your boy, that's right, me motherfuckers. I had a fantastic fucking week, and the legends of Smoky Valley keep rolling on. Joe Mixon, 28.8 points off of 159 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, 3 receptions, and 19 yards. An impressive performance by the RB1 for the Texans, and Bobby Slowick really took advantage of that run game this week against the Colts. Now, the true shock for me this week came with Ramondre Stevenson, who got 23.4 points off of 120 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. It seems like the Patriots are going to continue to use him more and more as one of the key central offensive elements. A.J. Brown got 24.4 points off of 5 receptions, 119 yards, and 1 touchdown, really putting emphasis on not just coming to Brazil. No, he came to Brazil to talk some fucking business. Joe Burrow got 8.44 points on a 72% completion percentage and 164 passing yards. They really just couldn't produce anything in the red zone, and as a result, the Bengals lost this past week. Now, my real concern for my team this week comes with Mark Andrews. He had 3.5 points. He caught both of his targets for 14 yards, but Isaiah Likely really stole the show for the Ravens. And that, to me, brings a little bit of concern because I don't know how the Ravens are going to use both tight ends moving forward. Despite all this, I love what my bench is doing right now. 15.1 points for Ladd McConkey. He had 5 receptions, 39 yards, and a touchdown. Brock Bowers had 12.1 points. He had 8 targets, 6 receptions, 58 yards, and he was the 3rd highest fantasy points option for tight ends in week 1, which means that I could potentially move him into my lineup this week, depending upon how I feel the Raiders will do against the Ravens. And then finally, Keenan Allen was 7.1 points. He did have 11 targets, 4 receptions for 29 yards, but he was taking a bulk majority of the targets for that wide receiver core. It does make me interested in how that's all going to shape out, given the fact that he did end up on the injury report coming into today, but we'll see what ends up unfolding by the time we get to Sunday. I absolutely love where I'm at, and there's only one direction for me here, and that's up, motherfuckers. So you better get fucking ready. You better. At number 2, we have an impressive come-from-behind victory for Nika and Otto. Cooper Kupp fell right back into form with the Rams, just bodying the Lions with 33.7 points. He had 21 targets, 14 receptions, and 110 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. He was absolutely cooking this week, especially with Puka going out halfway through the game. The real star of the show was Jordan Mason, who was the backup to the backup to the backup. He had 147 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown to total 24.1 points. And let's not forget that Cowboys defense, 21.45 points. They had 2 interceptions, 6 sacks. Micah Parsons just fucking ate up the Browns this week. And who could forget Kevontae Turpin, the former USFL MVP, taking a 60-yard punt all the way back to the house for a touchdown. We gotta love to see it. It's fucking Turpin time. George Pickens had a respectable 13.9 points with 6 receptions for 85 yards. He seems to be the main guy for the Steelers, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the Steelers can truly produce with him as their wide receiver one. And the most amazing thing about this whole team, no player ended up below 5 points in the starting lineup. That is a fantastic performance for Nika come week 1. And looking over at that bench, there's plenty of options to play with here. Jamison Williams had 25.8 points. He had 5 receptions, 121 yards, and a receiving touchdown against the Rams, as well as Brian Robinson Jr.'s 18.3 points for 40 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, and then 49 receiving yards to add on top of that. Nika Otto looked really impressive, but it's just week 1. We still got 14 weeks left. We'll have to see how this team unfolds over the course of the rest of the season. Coming in at that top spot, we've got that son of a bitch, JP. The big stat line that we have to keep in mind is 40%. 40%. Every single player you see on this page contributed to a touchdown. That's 40% of his team. That is insane. Jaden Daniels completely was a call and response to Saquon Barkley. Got 29.94 points off of 184 passing yards, 88 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Alvin Kamara got 22.5 points off of 15 receptions for 83 yards and a touchdown. They really just were using that running back all game long for the Saints. Jahmyr Gibbs got 17.9 points off of 40 rushing yards and a rushing TD, as well as 4 receptions for 34 yards, a wildly efficient running back run for the Lions. Deebo Samuel got 19.1 points off of 5 receptions for 74 yards, plus an additional 23 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, because who could forget that this fucking whore is not actually a wide receiver, but really a running back. Justin Jefferson came up big with 16.1 points off of 4 receptions, 59 yards, and a receiving touchdown. To add on to that stack, Aaron Jones got 19.5 points off of 94 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for the Vikings. And even looking over at the bench, Xavier Worthy, 21.1 points. He had 2 receptions, 47 yards, and a receiving touchdown, as well as 21 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. That is unbelievable for the rookie. It seems like the Chiefs have plenty of options, and I expect to see more coming out of Worthy this week. JP once again is showing us he's way too fucking knowledgeable with football. It's clear that his team is fucking cracked. We'll just have to see how long he gets to hold this top spot over the course of the whole season. To wrap up our week 1 power rankings, we have JP, Nika, and Otto, myself, Saira, Tristan, Warren, Zach, Tyler, Nick, and Lewis, and to finish things off, Maria and Kelly in the 10th place spot. And that's going to do it for our week 1 power rankings. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the post notification bell to join the Bridge Gang. Additionally, leave me a comment down below telling me what you liked in the power rankings and what you disliked, who you thought should be higher or lower. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! Getting into this test mode. Gonna pull off the Belichickian vibe. Throw the hood on and be fucking. Well, young Padawan, have you heard about Darth Brady the Wise?